Everyone refused to save paralyzed giant Viking, except this slave Maiden. The wind howled across the icy cliffs of the northern fjord, carrying with it a bitter chill that cut through the thickest of firs. The village below shivered under the heavy snow, and smoke curled lazily from the chimneys, a fragile comfort against the relentless cold. The villagers whispered in small groups, their words cautious and fearful. Everyone in the village knew the stories of the Stormbreaker, the giant Viking whose strength and fury had once protected them from invaders and wild beasts. But now, those tales were tinged with sorrow, for Eirik the Stormbreaker lay broken. He had been found by the edge of the frozen forest, lying still and unmoving. The battle that had felled him was shrouded in mystery, and rumors of dark curses spread quickly. Some said he had angered the spirits of the mountain. Others whispered of a shadowy warlock who had cursed him, leaving him paralyzed and vulnerable. No one dared approach him. No one, that is, except one small figure moving steadily through the snow. Astrid, the slave maiden, trudged carefully along the icy path. Her boots sank slightly into the snow, and her breath formed clouds that mingled with the morning fog. She had been a servant in the village for as long as she could remember, her hands calloused from years of washing, cooking, and carrying burdens she had never chosen. Most people ignored her, seeing only the pale, quiet girl who performed her duties without complaint. But Astrid's eyes were sharp, and her heart, though often weary, was not afraid of what others feared. She had heard of the giant's fall that morning, and something in her chest tightened. She did not fully understand why, only that she could not leave him to the cold. She had seen too many creatures and men of the village die slowly, abandoned because fear was stronger than courage, and she had never been one to stand aside. When she reached the place where Eirik lay, the sight stole her breath. The giant was enormous, even lying down. His long hair was matted with blood and ice, and his armor was battered and scratched, scarred from countless battles. His face, so often painted in tales of heroism and strength, was pale and contorted in pain. Eirik's eyes were open, but they stared without focus, as if trapped somewhere far from the world around him. Astrid knelt beside him, shivering not from the cold but from awe. "Sir, Eirik," she whispered, her voice trembling, I will help you." The giant's gaze flickered toward her, sharp and wary. A low growl escaped his lips, not from anger but from frustration. "Why would you, little one? No one wants me alive." His voice rumbled like distant thunder, rough yet tinged with pain. "Do you not fear the curse?" Astrid shook her head. "I am not afraid," she said softly. "I cannot leave you here." Eirik let out a hollow laugh, a sound that echoed strangely in the icy forest. "No fear, you are a small thing, a servant. You would risk your life for a broken giant." "I do not care about risk," Astrid replied firmly, her hands brushing snow from his shoulder. "I care about life, yours at least. Someone must try." For a moment the wind seemed to pause and the world held its breath. The giant's eyes softened slightly, the first hint of something human peeking through his anger and pride. No one had spoken to him with such courage in days, weeks, perhaps months. He had grown used to fear and avoidance, to people crossing to the other side of the road when he was seen. And now, here was a small, fragile girl, unafraid, touching him with hands that were meant for service, not heroism. Astrid worked carefully to move him, testing which muscles would respond. She had no magic, no great strength, only her determination. Slowly she managed to lift his arm, feeling the weight of it, the rigidity that would not bend. "I know it hurts," she whispered. "I know it is hard, but I will not leave you. Not now, not ever." Eirik groaned, the sound deep and mournful. "You speak of loyalty, yet you do not even know me. Do you not fear what I was, what I have done?" Astrid paused, looking into his stormy eyes. "I do not fear the man you were," she said quietly. "I only hope to see the man who can still be." The giant's chest heaved, the snow around them disturbed by the sheer force of his breathing. His pride, once unbroken, wrestled with the vulnerability forced upon him. "And if I fail you," he asked, "if the curse does not lift if I remain this husk?" "You will not fail me," Astrid said with unwavering certainty. "I will be here, always." The forest seemed to respond to their connection. Snow fell more lightly, and the wind carried a faint warmth, as if the world itself recognized the courage of one small girl and the struggle of a fallen giant. Days passed. Astrid returned to him each morning, bringing what little food she could gather and speaking to him, even when he could not respond. She sang quietly, told stories of the village, of children playing in the snow, of the simple beauties that the world often overlooked. Slowly, Irik's eyes began to focus. He would track her movement, sometimes blink, and once, very briefly, he tried to lift his head on his own. The villagers, seeing this, whispered amongst themselves, "A servant helping the Stormbreaker." "Foolish girl." They shook their heads, certain it was hopeless. No one dared interfere, but Astrid did not waver. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks, casting the world in fire-tinted shadow, Astrid settled beside Eirik. "I know it is difficult," she said, brushing his hair from his face. "I know it hurts, but I will not leave. You are not alone anymore." Eirik's breath caught. The words were simple, yet carried a weight he had not felt in years. He had been feared, admired, and revered, but never understood, never held without expectation. And here this small girl, this slave maiden, offered him nothing but presence, nothing but hope. "I do not know how to be without strength," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I am a warrior. I am supposed to protect, to conquer. Now I am nothing." Astrid touched his hand, feeling the rigid stiffness in his fingers. "You are not nothing," she said. "You are Eirik. You are the Stormbreaker." Strength is not just muscle and battle. It is also the heart that refuses to give up. That is what makes you a giant, even now. For a moment, the silence was broken only by the crackle of ice shifting and the distant howl of wolves. And then from the shadows came a sound that made Astrid's blood run cold, a whisper, low and sinister, that seemed to echo directly into her mind. "You cannot save him. Leave now or share his fate." Astrid's heart pounded, but she did not move. She gripped Eirik's hand tighter. "I do not care who threatens me," she said. "I will not leave him." Eirik, feeling the fear and courage emanating from her, found himself trembling, not from weakness, but from something he had not felt in years, gratitude and perhaps a spark of something deeper. "You are reckless," he murmured, "and yet perhaps I am fortunate." The first night under the open sky, with the wind howling around them and the snow falling softly, Astrid stayed by his side. She built a small fire with what wood she could find, letting the warmth brush against him. She hummed a quiet tune, a melody her mother had taught her long ago. And though he could not speak, Eirik listened, the sound pulling him closer to the living world he had thought lost forever. As dawn broke, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose, Astrid stood and looked out toward the horizon. Her resolve was firm. She had made a choice, and no curse, no shadow, no fear could sway her. And as she turned back to Eirik, she saw something she had not expected. His lips moved in a faint attempt at a smile, the first sign that life, and perhaps hope, still lingered in the giant. But far beyond the cliffs and the frozen forest, in the dark corners of the mountains, unseen eyes watched. A shadow stirred, whispering of curses unbroken, of darkness yet to come, and of the trials the small slave maiden had willingly chosen. Astrid's eyes met Eirik's, and in that silent exchange a bond was forged, a bond that would test courage, strength, and the very hearts of both of them. The journey had begun, and though no one else would save the Stormbreaker, Astrid would not falter. The wind carried a warning, yet in its howl was also a promise. The giant would rise again, not by the strength of others, but by the courage of one small, steadfast heart. And in the icy silence, Eirik felt the stirrings of something long buried within him, something fragile yet powerful. Hope. The sun rose slowly over the jagged peaks, casting a pale light on the icy cliffs. The snow shimmered like crushed crystals, and the wind carried a low, mournful howl that seemed to whisper secrets of old battles and lost warriors. Astrid, the small but steadfast slave maiden, knelt beside Eirik once more, brushing the frost from his heavy cloak. Eirik had slept through the night, yet his face still bore the lines of pain. Astrid's heart tightened. She had never feared a storm nor a wild beast, but watching the giant struggle, so proud and yet so helpless, struck a different kind of fear, one that gnawed at her from the inside. "I brought you some bread and warm broth," she said softly, placing the small meal near his side. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold but from worry. "Eat, please, you must regain your strength." Eirik's eyes, still shadowed with fatigue, followed her movements. His voice came out rough and strained. "Food is no cure for this. I am broken, little one." "My body, my pride shattered." Astrid shook her head, kneeling closer. "Perhaps, but healing is not only for the body. We must start with the heart and the mind." She reached out to touch his hand, brushing her fingers lightly over the icy skin. "You are not alone. I will not leave you." For the first time, Eirik seemed to study her, not with suspicion or anger, but with a strange, quiet curiosity. "You continue to risk yourself, even knowing what may happen, even knowing the whispers." "They are just whispers," Astrid said firmly. "I listen to my heart, not to fear." A low groan rumbled from his chest, a sound like distant thunder. He tried to lift his head, but his muscles refused. Astrid placed her hands under his shoulders and helped him sit slightly upright, supporting his enormous frame. It was a slow, careful effort, and Eirik's face twisted in pain. "You are relentless," he murmured, a mix of admiration and frustration in his voice. "Why do you care so much?" Astrid smiled faintly, though her eyes were serious. "Because courage is rare. And because I do not believe anyone should be left to die when I can help." Eirik's gaze softened slightly. In all his years, few had spoken to him like this. Few had looked at him and seen more than the armor, the scars, and the strength. And yet here was a small, quiet girl, offering not pity but understanding. Days turned into nights and nights into days. Astrid visited him without fail, bringing what little food she could gather, keeping the small fire alive against the cold and speaking softly to him. She told him stories of her childhood, of the forests that hid secrets older than any village, and of the small joys that could still be found even in the harshest winters. Eirik listened. At first he made no sound, only eyes flicking toward her, sometimes studying her movements with suspicion, sometimes with curiosity. But slowly he began to respond, murmuring short words, nodding slightly, even attempting to lift his hand when she encouraged him. The process was painful, both physically and emotionally, yet something in him began to awaken, a flicker of hope that he had long thought lost. One evening, as the northern lights danced across the sky in waves of green and violet, Astrid noticed a faint glow along Eirik's armor. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it pulsed like a heartbeat. She leaned closer, brushing away the snow and frost. Beneath the dents and scratches, intricate runes shimmered faintly, glowing from some hidden magic. "Eirik, do you see this?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with wonder. He blinked, turning his gaze to her. I have seen it," he said. "Since the battle, it binds me, though I do not know why." Astrid's mind raced. "It could be a curse," she whispered. "Something that keeps you weak, trapped, but perhaps it can be undone." Eirik's eyes narrowed. "You speak of danger once again. If this magic is cursed, then touching it, meddling with it, could bring ruin. I do not wish to endanger you, little one." Astrid reached out, placing her hand gently over the glowing rune. "I am already here, Eirik. I have already chosen this path. If I falter, it will not be because of fear. Let us try together." For a moment the wind stilled, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the rune flared brighter, sending a pulse of energy through Eirik's body. He gasped, a shudder running down his spine. Astrid held fast, anchoring him with her small, firm hands. Pain flashed across his face, and yet he did not push her away. Instead, he met her eyes, and for the first time there was trust, fragile, hesitant, but undeniable. "You are foolish," he said through clenched teeth. "And yet, somehow, I am grateful." The bond between them grew stronger in the following days. Astrid became not only his caretaker but also his anchor to the living world. Eirik, once consumed by bitterness and pride, found solace in her presence. They spoke of past regrets, of battles fought and lost, of loved ones they had failed. Astrid listened without judgment, offering only encouragement and hope. But as they worked together to awaken his body and spirit, the shadow of the curse lingered. At night, whispers slithered through the forest, voices that promised pain and warned of consequences. Astrid often felt them at the edges of her mind, yet she did not falter. One night, while she tended the fire, a soft glow appeared in the distance. She squinted, her breath catching. Figures moved in the snow, silent and deliberate. Eirik stirred beside her, sensing the disturbance. "They come," he said, his voice low and warning. Astrid stood, placing herself between him and the approaching shadows. "Let them come," she said firmly. "We are not afraid." The figures emerged, a band of cloaked strangers, moving with unnatural grace. Their faces were hidden, but the air around them pulsed with dark magic. One stepped forward, a tall figure with eyes that gleamed like obsidian. "You meddle with forces beyond your understanding," the stranger said, voice like ice. "The curse is not easily broken. Step aside or face the consequences." Astrid's hands tightened into fists. "I will not leave him. No curse, no threat, no fear will make me abandon him." Eirik, though still weak, stirred beside her. His eyes, once dull with pain, now shone with something fierce. "She speaks truth," he said. "I will stand together." The cloaked figures paused, sensing the bond between them. Magic and courage intertwined, creating a force that even the strangers could not ignore. Slowly, they retreated, melting into the shadows from which they had emerged. Astrid sank to her knees, exhausted but unbroken. Eirik's gaze softened, and he reached a trembling hand toward her. She grasped it, their fingers entwining. "You are remarkable," he whispered. "I do not deserve such loyalty." "You are not asking for loyalty," Astrid said softly. "You are asking for life." And courage is not measured by strength alone. For the first time in many months, Eirik smiled, not fully, but a flicker of warmth touched his features. "Perhaps I am learning that," he admitted. "I am learning that life, even a broken life, can still have purpose." Days passed, and progress came slowly but surely. Eirik could lift his arms a little more each day, and sometimes he managed to stand with Astrid's support. She guided him through simple movements, careful not to overstrain him. And every night they sat by the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of understanding. Yet even as hope grew, the threat of the curse lingered. Astrid could feel it in the cold nights, in the whispers carried by the wind, and in the faint glow of the runes that still marked Eirik's armor. The battle ahead would not be easy, and neither of them could know what trials waited in the dark forests and mountains beyond the village. But one thing was certain: neither would face it alone. Astrid had chosen to stand by the giant, and Eirik, for the first time in years, allowed himself to trust, not only in her, but in the possibility of healing, hope, and perhaps even something more. And as the northern lights danced across the sky, casting colors over snow and ice, a quiet promise formed between them. The journey would be dangerous, the nights long and cold, but together they would face whatever the darkness sent. The Stormbreaker, once abandoned and paralyzed, was beginning to awaken, and the slave maiden who refused to leave him, she would not falter, no matter what shadows lingered. The forest beyond the village was quiet, but the silence carried a weight heavier than any storm. Ancient trees, their trunks twisted with age, loomed like guardians of a forgotten world. Snow crunched beneath Astrid's boots as she guided Eirik, now able to walk with support, through the narrow path that led to the heart of the wilderness. His massive frame moved carefully, each step an effort, yet his eyes shone with determination. "Are you sure about this?" Eirik asked, his deep voice rumbling through the still air. He glanced at Astrid, his gaze lingering longer than usual, a mixture of concern and gratitude in his eyes. "This forest, it holds more than shadows. You risk yourself with every step." Astrid's grip on his arm tightened slightly. "I have never feared the unknown, and I will not start now. We are going to find the source of the curse. We will end it together." Eirik studied her, searching her face for hesitation. There was none, only courage and quiet strength. The giant had faced armies, storms, and beasts of the wild, yet something in this small girl's resolve stirred something deep within him, a sense of hope he had long believed lost. As they moved deeper, the air grew colder, and the snow turned to ice beneath their feet. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and the faint glow of runes along Eirik's armor pulsed in response, as if sensing the approach of the magic that had bound him. Astrid noticed it, a chill running down her spine. "It's near," she whispered. Eirik's jaw tightened. "I can feel it too. The curse, it watches us. It waits for weakness." They reached a clearing where the trees gave way to a frozen pond. Mist hovered above the ice, curling like living smoke. At the center, a figure stood, cloaked in darkness, its face hidden beneath a hood. The air shimmered with power, and the snow around them swirled as if stirred by an invisible hand. "So, the little servant dares to approach me," the figure said, voice sharp and cold. "And she brings the broken giant with her. How touching." Astrid stepped forward, refusing to shrink from the voice. "We know you cursed him. We are here to end it. Whatever magic binds him, we will face it." The cloaked figure laughed, a sound that sent shivers through the forest. "Do you think courage alone can undo centuries of power? The Stormbreaker, he is nothing now, and yet you cling to him. How noble." Eirik straightened as best he could, his enormous hands trembling slightly. "I am not nothing," he said, his voice strong despite the pain. "I am Eirik, and I will not be broken by your darkness." The shadow shifted, and the mist thickened. "We shall see," it whispered. With a flick of a hand, the ice beneath Eirik cracked, sending him stumbling. Astrid's heart leapt, and she rushed to support him. "You cannot stand alone," she cried, holding him steady. "I will not let you fall." Eirik's eyes met hers, and in that moment the bond they had forged was more powerful than any spell. The shadow hissed in frustration as the runes on Eirik's armor flared brightly, casting light across the mist. For the first time, Astrid saw not just a broken giant, but a man who could rise again with courage, heart, and trust. The shadow recoiled but did not flee. "You may have strength of spirit, little girl," it said, "but power alone cannot undo what I have wrought. You cannot save him without sacrifice." Astrid's gaze hardened. "I do not fear sacrifice. I fear only inaction." She placed a hand over Eirik's chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. "We will face this together. Whatever comes, we face it side by side." Eirik's breath caught, and for a moment the silence of the forest seemed louder than the world itself. He had spent years believing strength meant standing alone, that vulnerability was weakness. But now, with Astrid by his side, he understood that courage was not measured in solitude. It was measured in trust and connection. The shadow raised both arms, and the mist coalesced into forms of creatures twisted by dark magic. Wolves with eyes of fire, skeletal beasts, and figures that shimmered like smoke surged toward them. Astrid and Eirik stood firm, facing the unnatural army. Astrid whispered, "We must fight together, not just with strength but with heart." She drew upon her courage, standing firmly against the creatures as they lunged. Eirik, too, stepped forward, his massive fists swinging with precision, his movements aided by the faint glow of the runes. Each strike seemed to draw power from their bond, a force stronger than the darkness surrounding them. The creatures howled and surged, yet Astrid's determination did not waver. She shouted encouragement, directing Eirik to shift, to strike, to endure. Slowly, the dark forms began to falter, unable to withstand the combined force of her courage and his awakening strength. But the shadow remained, watching, calculating, patient. "You are clever," it hissed, "but cleverness cannot undo destiny." Astrid's eyes narrowed. "Destiny is not written by fear. It is written by those brave enough to act." She felt Eirik's hand close around hers, and the warmth of his grasp steadied her. Together, they formed a circle of light against the darkness, their trust creating a force that the shadow had not anticipated. Eirik's voice rose, strong and commanding. "We will not fall, not to you, not to the curse, not to fear." The mist swirled violently, then began to dissipate as the power of their connection intensified. The runes on his armor glowed brightly, burning away the lingering threads of the curse. The shadow shrieked, its form flickering like a candle in a storm, until it finally dissipated into nothingness, leaving the clearing silent except for their ragged breaths. Astrid sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. Eirik leaned heavily on her, yet there was strength in his posture, a sense of victory and renewal. You were remarkable," he said, his voice deep and rough, yet tinged with awe. "I would have been lost without you." "You are stronger than you believe," Astrid said softly, brushing snow from his shoulder, "and stronger than the darkness that sought to claim you." For the first time, Eirik allowed himself to fully smile, a smile not of pride but of relief and gratitude. He looked down at Astrid, his massive hand enveloping hers with gentle care. "I do not know what the future holds," he said quietly, "but I know that with you, perhaps I can face it." The forest seemed to breathe around them, the snow sparkling in the fading light. The darkness that had haunted Eirik was gone, for now. And yet, the air still carried a faint hum of ancient magic, a reminder that the world they inhabited was full of mysteries and trials yet to come. Astrid helped him to a safe resting place near the frozen pond. They sat together, the silence between them no longer heavy with fear, but with unspoken understanding. Each glance, each small touch was a promise of courage, trust, and something more delicate, yet undeniable. A bond forged through trials, danger, and shared hope. Night fell, painting the snow in deep blues and purples. The northern lights shimmered above, reflecting in the frozen water like liquid fire. Astrid and Eirik watched in silence, the weight of the day settling over them. "You have changed me," Eirik said softly, his voice carrying over the ice. "I have been alone for too long, believing strength meant standing apart. Now I understand that courage is in unity, and perhaps hope too." Astrid rested her head lightly against his massive arm. "You have changed me as well," she whispered. "I have learned that even the smallest heart can hold great courage, and that even the broken can rise again." For a long while they sat in quiet companionship, watching the sky, listening to the soft crackle of ice, and feeling the warmth of a bond neither had expected but both had needed. And yet, in the far distance, in the shadows beyond the forest, a faint light flickered. A new presence, older and darker than the shadow they had faced, observed silently. It whispered promises of challenges yet to come, of trials that would test not only strength, but heart, loyalty, and love. Astrid shivered not from cold but from the sense that their journey was far from over. She looked at Eirik, whose eyes mirrored her concern and resolve. "Whatever comes," she said quietly, "we face it together." Eirik nodded, the first true acceptance of vulnerability and trust shining in his eyes. "Together," he echoed. And as the northern lights danced across the sky, painting the world in colors that seemed impossible, the two of them, giant and maiden, sat side by side, ready to face the darkness that still waited beyond the horizon. The curse was weakened, the shadow dispersed, but the story was far from over. The forest whispered of greater dangers, ancient magic, and secrets yet to be uncovered. And in the hearts of Astrid and Eirik, a fire had been lit, a fire of courage, trust, and a bond that even the darkest night could not extinguish. The wind carried a bitter chill through the trees, and the forest seemed alive with whispers. Astrid and Eirik stood at the edge of a dark ravine, where the shadows of ancient magic coiled like snakes across the frozen ground. The air was heavy, charged with a presence neither of them had yet fully seen, but both could feel. This was the heart of the curse, the source of the darkness that had paralyzed Eirik and haunted them since his fall. Astrid tightened her cloak around her shoulders, her small hand gripping the hilt of a simple dagger, not for fighting, but as a symbol of courage. Eirik stood beside her, towering and massive, yet still weary from the trials they had endured. His armor glowed faintly with the runes that had begun to heal his strength, and his eyes reflected determination mixed with the shadows of doubt. "We are here," Astrid said softly, her voice steady. "Whatever waits, we face it together." Eirik nodded, his massive hands clenched into fists. "Together," he repeated. For the first time, he did not feel the weight of pride alone, nor the burden of being a lone warrior. With Astrid at his side, he felt a new strength, one that came not from muscle but from trust and courage. The forest parted before them, revealing a clearing where the snow seemed darker, almost black, as though absorbing the light. In the center of the clearing stood a figure draped in flowing shadows. Its eyes burned with a cold fire, and its voice carried like a winter storm. "So," it said, each word like ice against skin, "the broken giant walks and the little servant follows. You believe courage can undo my work. You are foolish." Astrid stepped forward, unwavering. "I do not believe courage alone will do it, but I do believe that hope, trust, and love can overcome darkness." The shadow laughed, a hollow sound that seemed to echo from the very mountains. "Love," it hissed. "Foolish child, this is not a story of hearts. It is a story of power, and power belongs to me." Eirik shifted, his massive frame tense. "You are wrong," he said. "Strength is not measured by fear or control. It is measured by the courage to stand, to protect, and to trust. That is what makes a giant, even when broken." The shadow's form writhed and twisted, and suddenly the ground beneath them trembled. Ice cracked and snow flew into the air as ghostly forms emerged from the darkness, figures twisted by ancient magic, half-formed, half-shadow. Wolves with eyes like molten silver, humanoid shapes with limbs too long, and wraiths that moved with unnatural grace surrounded them. Astrid did not flinch. She placed a hand on Eirik's arm. "Remember, it is not just your strength, Eirik, it is ours together." Eirik's chest heaved, and for a moment the giant felt fear claw at him. But then he saw the unwavering determination in her eyes, the courage that had carried them through forests, ice, and shadow. With a roar that shook the snow-covered trees, he raised his fists and stepped forward. The battle was fierce, though brief, for it was not only a test of strength, but of heart. Eirik swung with precision, the glowing runes on his armor striking down the shadowy creatures. Astrid moved beside him, guiding, directing, and supporting him with every motion. Each movement, each command, seemed to feed into a force neither magic nor darkness could fully resist, the bond of trust between them. The shadow shrieked and lashed at them with dark tendrils, trying to separate them to sow fear and doubt. But Astrid's courage never wavered. She grabbed Eirik's hand when a tendril surged toward him, anchoring him with her small, firm grip. "We are not afraid," she shouted. "We are stronger together," Eirik's eyes blazed. With renewed strength, he struck at the shadow's core, the runes on his armor flaring brilliantly. The creatures faltered, the tendrils shrank back, and the dark figure wavered like a candle in the wind. "You cannot win," it hissed, voice shaking with anger. "Yes," Astrid said firmly, stepping closer to Eirik. "We can, because hope, trust, and courage are stronger than fear, and together nothing can break us." The shadow's form began to fracture, the darkness unraveling under the light of their bond. Snow fell like silver rain, washing over the clearing, and the faint glow of the runes intensified. Irik's muscles, once rigid with paralysis, pulsed with strength restored not by magic alone, but by the courage and heart of the small maiden who had refused to leave him. With a final roar that echoed through the mountains, Eirik stepped forward and struck the ground. Light exploded outward from his feet, burning through the shadow and the twisted forms it had summoned. The dark figure screamed as it dissolved into nothingness, leaving silence in its wake. Astrid sank to her knees, exhausted but victorious. Eirik knelt beside her, his enormous frame leaning protectively over her. For the first time there was no shadow in the forest, no curse to bind him, only snow glistening under the stars. "You did this," he said softly, his hand brushing her hair back. "I could not have done it without you. You were brave, small though you are, braver than anyone I have known." Astrid shook her head, smiling despite her weariness. "It was not just me. You stood even when you thought yourself broken. You trusted me and you fought. We did this together." Eirik's eyes softened and he reached for her hand, enveloping it in his massive palm. "I have lived many years believing strength meant standing alone, that vulnerability was weakness. But now I know it is not weakness, it is courage, and it is love." Astrid's heart skipped, and she looked down at their joined hands, a warmth spreading through her despite the cold. "Then perhaps we have both learned something," she whispered. "That even broken hearts and bodies can rise again when we trust and stand together." The northern lights shimmered above, painting the snow in green, violet, and gold. The world seemed to exhale as though relieved, as though the forest itself had witnessed the triumph of courage and heart over darkness. Eirik rose fully, towering yet renewed. He looked down at Astrid, his eyes filled with gratitude and something more, something tender and unspoken, a bond forged in trials, danger, and trust. "We have faced shadows that could have destroyed us," he said, "and yet here we are, alive, strong, together." Astrid stood beside him, her small figure dwarfed by his immense presence, yet her spirit towering. "And we will remain together," she said softly. "Through storms, darkness, and whatever else may come. I will not leave you, not now, not ever." For the first time in years, Eirik allowed himself to truly smile. Not the smile of a warrior proud of victories, but the smile of a man who had found hope, trust, and perhaps even love. He pulled her close, careful not to harm her with his strength, and held her as one would hold a precious and fragile treasure. The snow fell gently around them, and the forest, once dark and foreboding, seemed to glow with the calm after a storm. Birds began to call from distant trees, and the whisper of wind through the branches sounded almost like laughter, a soft, joyous sound that spoke of renewal and peace. Yet even as the world seemed at rest, a sense of wonder lingered in the air. The curse had been broken, the shadow defeated, but the forest still held secrets. Ancient magic still hummed beneath the snow, and the mountains beyond promised new adventures, challenges, and mysteries. Eirik looked at Astrid, his eyes reflecting both strength and humility. "Whatever comes," he said quietly, "we face it together. You have given me courage I thought I had lost forever." Astrid smiled, warmth filling her chest. "And you have given me hope. Strength is not just the body, Eirik, it is the heart, and yours is stronger than any curse." They stood together, hand in hand, gazing out over the snow-covered mountains. The world was vast, full of dangers, yes, but also beauty, life, and the possibility of something greater. And in that moment, they understood that the true journey was not only the defeat of darkness, but the bond they had formed, the courage, trust, and love that would guide them through whatever lay ahead. The northern lights shimmered one last time, a blessing of color and light, as if the world itself celebrated their triumph. And in the quiet, eternal snow, two hearts stood united, a giant and a maiden, ready to face the future together, no longer defined by fear, curse, or isolation, but by trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond forged in the heart of the frozen forest.